Alright, today we're going to do a Mag.JS tutorial. We're going to do a simple to-do application, specifically with the proxy support in Firefox that Mag.JS has. It just adds a little bit of more dynamism, especially for values that are coming from like user input without you having to predefine settings. So basically what proxy does, if it's undefined, it will attempt to use one of the 5 element matchers that Mag.JS uses to get the value from the current HTML. So we're going to accomplish or try to accomplish 3 things today. We're going to write a list of to-dos, add a new to-do, and remove to-dos. Actually, we're going to add a 4th one as well. It's going to be to toggle completed or done class as well. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is create a class to house our to-do list. That's always fun in Mag.js. Just shows how simple it is to create a list of things. Alright, so this is a basic Mag.js setup here. You have your module, which has an ID. You reference it here. You pass it an object. The object takes the same structure, controller and a view. Controller is initialized once. View on every change to the state, which is just the instance of the object of the controller. And props are defaults that are accessible here and accessible here. Element is the actual top level node that you're dealing with, which is here. Alright, so to make our list show something, in Mag.js all you have to do is define an array. And there you go. Now obviously you don't want to define it inside your object. You'd probably pass it something like that. And let's define some minimal default object. There we go. Now you can't see anything because we haven't mapped any of the property names yet here. So to do that, all we have to do is simply set a simple span with maybe like a data bind. Remember, there's 5 different element matchers: ID, tag, class, data bind, as well as name attribute value. So that's why we can see this clean house right there on the right. Simple as that. Okay, so I think we got number 1 down. So why don't we create a snapshot so as people walk through it, and I will post this link with the description of the video. You can walk through it from 1, 2, 3, and on. So the next thing is to add a new to-do. So we're going to need first is probably an input field. Why don't we create a form here, and input field as well as a submit button. So now we have our basic HTML setup here. As you can see, we have a form, input field. You notice our name attribute is to do input, and our name here for the submit button is add. We're going to reference these in our view, so we can add things here. All right. Let's see. Why don't we get started? So the first thing to do is we're going to, as I said, reference that name attribute, which is the submit button. And we're going to add an event on click. And on click, we're simply going to add the object, or add to the object the input. Now, since we're using proxy, as I said earlier, you don't have to assign the variable. All you have to do is access it if it's undefined. So any undefined variable in our object in our state, it will use the element matchers to find the value that is existing in the HTML. Now, if you're not in Firefox, a way to do that is to simply go like this, or you can define the value as a state object, and when it changes, you can bind it. So there's a few different ways to do that. Alright, so why don't we test this out? Add something here. I'm going to say more videos. Oh, looks like it actually submitted the form. Alright, so since it's a submit form, we need to return false, or do prevent default. Let's just do return false. It's simple enough. I think we're outside the function. There we go. So now, when I add more videos, it shows up. And that's simple how Mag.JS works. It's really straightforward. We create a list by giving it an array. We give it an array of objects, which will map to HTML elements within that element. And if we want to add more to it, we simply add more to the array, and it will duplicate the original first element as a template for the preceding children. So it looks like we have accomplished feature number 2. What about feature number 3, remove to-dos? Well, to do that, it's going to be a little more complicated because we're going to need something to identify that it's done. And usually a good idea for that would be a checkbox. So why don't we add a checkbox to our HTML? There we go. Now we have a checkbox. You can see in our HTML, right under our to-do list. It's visible here. So now if we add something new, there's a checkbox too. But to remove that, we're going to need a button. So why don't we add one last bit of HTML, and I think we're going to be done for the HTML part of this tutorial. So our last button is going to be just remove marked. Okay. See a snapshot for each of these parts of our journey, and there it is. So now we have to attach an event to that as well. So why don't we do this one in our controller? We'll say this dot remove. Actually, before we define our function, why don't we just attach it? That's always useful. I'll put it over here. We're going to say state.button because it's the only button that we have. We're going to add an on click to it. And our function is simply going to filter our to-do list. And check to see if it's done or not. So if the item is done, we return false, which means it will remove it from the list, or else we return true and we keep it in the list. Okay, and we try that out. So I'm going to click the checkbox and click remove marked. Doesn't seem to do it. Alright, so it looks like on click, we haven't defined anything as being done yet, right? Because this done is not attached to any DOM element. And even if it is, we're looking for false. We're not, so it hasn't been mapped, basically. So what we need to do is we need to hook into the DOM here. I'm going to go through our to-do list, and on click, and a little function here. And what we're going to do is we're going to simply say when you click the checkbox, whatever that current state is of checked, true or false, will be the value of that first one. Okay, so let's check that out. So I've selected the box. I click remove and it goes away now. Let's look at that again. Now, if I haven't selected it, it should not remove it. There, so it didn't remove it. Let me save a snapshot. When I click it, it does remove it. Let's try with multiple items. Alright, so let's do our more movies. Ooh, that's a little strange, but let's try that nonetheless. Ooh, that's also strange. Notice how it has the first checkbox checked again, even though our second one wasn't checked. There's some strangeness going on here. We can definitely see that. I think one thing, let's see if I remove them both, what happens. Oh, interesting. I think one thing we can say that's odd is the structure of our HTML. There might be something a little bit off here. I'll put another div up over here as a container for our list items. That looks a little bit better. Let's see if I add more videos. There it goes. Now it's underneath it. Alright, that makes sense. Alright, so we still have that issue about the checkbox. So when I click the first checkbox and I remove it, notice the second box is not checked. See how it checks the first one again? So what's happening is that the index of the item, when it's being removed, is being retained to the first one, even though this is actually not the first one anymore. So we need a way to maintain the index of the items. And this is where Mag.JS comes in again. We have a special onConfig, which is basically onload utility helper built right in. Do access to the node. If this is the first time it's run, is new. Context that you can pass within this object because it's being called every time the view is executed, which is any time the state changes. And a useful thing is the index, if there's multiple of them. And since we're doing a greedy search here, dollar prefix is always greedy, there might be multiple. So what we're going to do here is basically set the attribute to the index of our first child, which is our checkbox. So this node's first child attribute index of this index, which will be the first to-do list. And then we can use that or we can use that to get, when we click the index to make sure we're on the right index. Then we can use the index right here. Does that make sense? All right, let's give that a shot. Let me add our more videos. We love that. Select the first one and remove marked. Oh, it's still checked. Okay, let's see what's going on here. Okay. So one thing we didn't do was set the check state in our config. So the check state property of the first child needs to go according to the index. So we have a programmatic check. So when we remove something, it's going to rerun config. And then config can set the check state of that first one to the programmatic one, which has already been set here. Okay, let's do that again. Let's check the first box. The second one is not selected. Click remove, and there we go. Do another snapshot. Alright, so I think we've basically accomplished the first three now. We're able to list our to-dos, we can add a new one, and we can remove them. Why don't we just do a few more just to show that we can do lots of different stuff. I'm going to just randomly remove things. I'm removing 2, 2, 3. So we should have an empty one and 2, 3, 4 left. Remove the last one. Remove all of them. Add a new one. Add 2 of the same new ones. Alright, so I think we're pretty good on that. So now we would like to add one last thing, is our toggle. So we have a class here to simply show a decoration of a line through and graying out of the checked box and our to-do item. So all we're going to do for that is toggle. Now we have, like we showed here, are these nifty to-do list config and onClick, which is very helpful, especially with dealing with arrays. So for a toggle onClick, what we can do here is simply say, because we want it to happen to the whole parent, and we're not in the parent when we're clicking the checkbox, is to toggle the parent node to our class. Done. Let's check that out. Oh, there we go. And there we go. Oh, well, that was weird. See what's happening? Is our config, remember our config runs every time it's basically on load for that specific item. So kind of the same case that we had before about the index being checked, even though it wasn't. So programmatically we're going to have to do something on the config as well for the toggle. And all we need to do for that is, this is built in JavaScript. This is nothing special to Mag.JS. These are all, Mag.JS is plain JavaScript DOM. I mean, our templating language is HTML. There is no fancy new templating language. All we're dealing with are really helpers. So here we are. So we can just toggle the done of the class, and we're going to do it programmatically. So if this is true, it will add it, and if it's false, it will always remove it. Okay. Let's save for that. And let's try this out again. And there we go. So that basically wrapped it all up. There's one little more part we can do. We can clean this code up a little bit. I think I'd like to do that and just show you kind of best practices. So I think the remove one especially, we'd like to put in the controller. Why don't we do that? So basically what we're going to say here is take this out. I want to say state dot remove. Put this up over here. This dot remove equal like that. And since we're here in the controller, we can say this. And I think the other thing we can do is our add to. Let's get rid of it from here. We're going to say state dot add to. And this one we're actually going to bind to state. call this add to equals that should be okay because here we need to put this. This needs to be this too over here. Alright, let's just test this out. Alright, so all we were doing is just really cleaning up the view because, like I said, the view is being run constantly anytime anything changes. So this should just make it more efficient and cleaner to look at, just for your own cognitive sake. And so the remove button is calling the remove function on click, and the add button is calling the add to with the bind state function over here, the add to. All right, let's check it out. Let's run through our little test that we were doing already. Okay. Oh, remove. Not seem to be working. Oh, we didn't bind remove, did we? So this has to be bound with this, only because we didn't bind it down here. It's just showing you a different kind of style. All right, so let's try that again. There we go. All right, I think that's about it. Thanks for watching, and check out Mag.JS. I will update this video description with the JS bin URL. Thank you very much.